Hello, happy Friday. Welcome to the Unscripted Files. My name is Madelyn Cunningham. I'm a development producer in the unscripted entertainment industry, bringing you candid conversations with the minds behind your favorite form of entertainment. Happy Valentine's Day to those who celebrate. Happy Galentine's Day to those who celebrate. I hope you have a lot of love in your life today, no matter who it's from, your friends, your romantic partner, your pets, the community you've built, and from yourself. There you go. Today we have a really interesting conversation. I have a friend, a working partner, and prolific producer who started her career doing Escaping Polygamy and went on to do Secrets of Polygamy. She has a ton of other shows under her belt, guys. Fixer to Fabulous, Design Down Under, everything you could think of. But I want to talk to her about how do you infiltrate a cult? What is it like? How dangerous is it? How do you build trust with these subjects? And especially considering that documentary, like these things take so long. And I think a lot of people have questions about this type of sort of investigative filmmaking. So anyway, I'm really excited for you to listen to this. Here is my conversation with Aurelia Boyle. Hey, Aurelia, welcome to the Unscripted Files.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, whether you know it or not, but I think I've told you, I really view you as such a mentor to me. Aurelia was the first person to take a chance on me with one of my show ideas many, many years ago, and has just so graciously guided me through so much of my career. And so you were one of the first people that I wanted to chat with.
Thank you. That is kind of you. And we could see right away at RIVR that you had so much potential. So I'm so glad that our partnership continues on. I am happy to do whatever you ask, which is why I'm sitting here right now.
I love it. I love it. Well, talk to me about, tell me what you do right now. So you mentioned RIVR Media. So talk to me about your role there and sort of the iconic shows that listeners would know of that you're a part of.
Yeah. Okay. So I work for RIVR Media. We are an unscripted television production company based in Knoxville, Tennessee. I work remotely, live in LA, and I have been with them for a long time. Over 10 years, which is, I think, rare in this industry, but it's just one of those companies where people tend to stick around forever because they have such a nice work culture, nice office culture. And when you find something like that, especially as a working mom, you tend to stick with it. So I've been with them for a really long time. When I started at RIVR, they were probably best known for doing lifestyle shows. They were just down the road from what was then Scripps, what would eventually become Discovery Communications. So naturally, they were doing a lot of stuff for DIY. At that time, HGTV. There was no Magnolia yet, but they were doing stuff for Food Network, Great American Country. And they had a really successful business doing those types of shows. One of my mandates when I started with RIVR was, let's expand, let's diversify. And that ended up being a really smart call on their part, because I think to stay afloat in this industry, you really need to be able to do a lot of different things, and it's very easy to get pigeonholed. So we right away decided to go after true crime. It was a passion of mine, and it was just something that we kind of fell into. I developed a show called Escaping Polygamy. At that time, it was for Lifetime Movie Network, actually, which I don't think is around anymore. And we ended up selling it. It bounced around between A&E, Lifetime proper. We did multiple seasons, and the rest is history. It was sort of our first foray into the true crime space, and it ended up being a really good thing for us. And we're still doing a lot of programming in that world. It was a story that really resonated with viewers, and I think still does.
I mean, even right now, and we know that polygamy is a extremist part of the Mormon LDS religion, but even that world in pop culture right now with Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey. I mean, there's a lot around that particular part of the country and that religion right now. And you guys are obviously doing Secrets of Polygamy as well. So, back when you were first getting into this, why this? Were you just fascinated by it? Had you heard about it, read an article about it? Why this particular subject of polygamy, and how did you make contacts? How does that even work for producers out there who are in a similar situation where they are wanting to sort of, infiltrate a group or tell a story? Like, how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting. I initially had read an essay by a woman who was, I think at that time, probably in her 60s. She was a grandmother. At that point, she had grown up in a polygamous group. And she had written this essay about what it was like to grow up in this world, how she ended up leaving, and why she was an activist now to help women get out of this community. I was just so blown away by what she had to say. First of all, I was fascinated. I did not know a ton about polygamy, although back in the day I had read Under the Banner of Heaven. And so I knew a little bit about it. I was always fascinated by it, but hearing her story from a woman's perspective, which I think was important, it really resonated with me. And just her commitment to activism and women's empowerment resonated with me. Those two themes, even though I did not grow up in a world at all similar, those are two things that those are touchstones in my life. So I reached out to her, basically a cold call, and said, hey, I love what you had to write. I'm really fascinated by this world. Can we talk? That began a series of conversations. And eventually she invited us out to Salt Lake to meet with some of her contacts. And, she had no interest herself in being in front of the camera, and frankly, not even behind the camera. She just, was a part of this real life Underground Railroad that was helping people get out of these communities. She introduced us at the time to 3 young women who were sisters. They had grown up in the Order, which is a polygamous cult. It's essentially a crime family. At different times in their childhood, they had escaped. A couple of them had grown up in the foster system when they escaped as adolescents. And they had made this pact before they escaped. I think they made this pact when they were like 7 or 8 years old. It's really extraordinary that if they ever made it out, if they ever survived, they were going to come together and help other people. And so at that time of meeting them, they had just been reunited. They were young adults, and, they were very much interested in having a platform so they could, number one, tell their story, and number two, help others. So it was really kind of this fateful thing. I will say, my boss, Lori Stryer, the CEO of RIVR, was instrumental in fostering a relationship with these women and figuring out, they have a powerful message. How do we turn that into a show that's both informative, entertaining, empowering? I like to think of Escaping Polygamy as a little bit of a Trojan horse, right? I would say it's less about Mormonism, it's less about religion, and it's more about domestic violence. Because at the end of the day, that's what these women, children, and even, these boys, young men, are going through. And that is an epidemic in this country, except we were able to fold it into this story that's essentially a thrilling crime drama. It's a cult story, but it's very core. It really is about domestic violence. And so for that reason, I'm proud. It's hard to tell those kinds of stories on television. They tend to be dark. Nobody wants to buy something like that. Again, all credit due to the team at RIVR and Lori. They were able to wrap these very sort of serious themes in something that was exciting, that was watchable and entertaining, but it also had a moral urgency to it.
Absolutely.
That's really it. Yeah.
I love that you said that, because ultimately you can watch this and maybe not relate because you aren't part of a fundamentalist group, but so many women can relate to feeling controlled, watched, manipulated, abused. I mean, there is such a relatability in that way. I was actually watching a few episodes before we hopped on, and you're right. There was such a empowerment angle, even with the daughters talking to their own mother, who totally recognized what it was, but couldn't seem to really get out. So when you guys first went out there and were meeting with them, like, was it, you had to be super careful? It was really secret? Like, how did you go about navigating that place and that world and trying to make sure you kept everything on the down low?
When you are storytelling in this world, you have to be cautious. And there is sort of a secretive element. I think too, Lori and the team can tell you that there were some frightening incidents while they were actually shooting the series. I think at one point someone had, bashed out the windows to their production van. So, the threat is real, and you are exposing groups and shining a light on something, and people aren't going to like that. You have to sort of take precautions, and you also have to be mindful of, the brave men and women who choose to tell their story. How can you protect them as well? We had some really great partners in the field. Matt and Tawny Browning are a investigative duo. They're also a married couple. Matt was former law enforcement. He had worked undercover. Together, they had taken down one of the biggest skinhead groups in the country. So they're like this dynamic husband-wife investigative duo that came onto the show. They're also mainstream LDS and just really sort of kind, wonderful, moral people. They came into this world, and I have to say, one thing they brought to the table was not only did they help sort of inform kind of the security aspect of what they were doing, they also kind of put their heart and souls into this community. They really kind of felt for these individuals. They kind of stepped up and said, whether or not cameras are present, we want to help these folks. So it's become a passion of theirs. And it's something that even when the cameras are off, even in between us doing shows about this world, Matt and Tawny are immersed in it. So I would say, they're as much a part of this as anything, and our ears to the ground, and now have become kind of a conduit into this community. And it's really rooted in something for them that is pure, which is, we're just here to help. We care about doing what's right for people. We saw a group that was, underrepresented, but also being kind of victimized, and, we want to help. So that was a big part of it. I think having someone like Lori, who is so bold as a storyteller and willing to take risks, and then having, two people like Matt and Tawny, who are so knowledgeable about this world, but also so caring and ready to invest themselves in it. I would say those are kind of three pillars that have allowed us to not only tell stories in this world, but sort of maintain a reputation as a production company, producers that can be trusted.
There are so many parts of in true crime, in recreation and storytelling, just in this world in general, that there are moral and ethical things to deal with. And the fact that it's so important to you to leave it better than you found it, and that through this series, there was actual genuine support happening that continues. It wasn't just pop in, capture, thanks a lot, bye. It's so important because you have to be responsible with these types of stories. These are people's real lives. And that can't be lost on trying to sell the concept or sell the show or get the entertainment. And I love that you communicated so clearly that how important it is to not only gain the trust of these people, but to earn it as well, and to ensure that you're careful with it.
Absolutely. And I think, on Secrets of Polygamy, that was something that suddenly became, it was something RIVR had done even from the beginning. And now sort of the corporate culture is catching up. But on Secrets of Polygamy, it was important to the network and to us to have an aftercare policy. When the cameras are off, and you have gracefully shared your story with us, if there are needs that you have, how can we help with those, and also what to do when you encounter situations that could be problematic. What's your responsibility as a production company? We thought through all of those things. It was so important to us, and it's still important to us. You're right. There are a lot of sort of ethical issues, and we've always tried to be very mindful. And honestly, just kind of, really just comes down to acting like decent human beings.
It sounds like something a woman would make. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
It sounds like part of it. Woman-founded production company. I can't lie, but no, I absolutely love that. And I think it is so crucial, especially in a day and age where ultimately audiences are smart. They know what's happening, right? And they're being more discerning about what they're watching and if it's ethical, if it's moral. And so I love that was is such a priority for you guys as a production company, as a producer.
Yeah, and it was, the actual, policy and a lot of those kind of questions and answers to those questions. We thought those through deeply with another partner of ours, a woman named Ashley Easter, who is an activist, and she also is the founder of a nonprofit called Courage 365 that specifically helps people who are coming out of religious abuse, men and women. And her story is, she's not just an activist, she's also a survivor herself. So she was really able to help us shape those policies. And it was important for us to kind of not just make this stuff up out of thin air, but talk to somebody who's a real expert in this arena. So again, it was great to be able to kind of, reach out to somebody who knew better than us. And I think that's a key to this too. It's, you sort of rely on people that are a little bit smarter than you. and who have an expertise. And we've never been afraid to do that and sort of form these collaborative relationships.
Totally. It's the old adage of like, if you can't do it yourself, hire someone who will. And I think in the age of production budgets plummeting and going down, I think the fact that you guys still prioritize these roles need to be filled. We need to bring these people in to, consult with us on certain issues. Like, I think that is incredibly important because it's real life. Like you said, it's real stuff. And I just think that's absolutely incredible. So from Escaping Polygamy to now Secrets of, did you maintain relationships with these individuals for the past few years, and some of them are still in Secrets of? Like, how
Yeah, absolutely.
have you brought that forward?
Well, I mean, we've maintained relationships, but I will say, once again, Matt and Tawny, and specifically Tawny Browning, is someone who just, I think she fell in love with the strength of this community of survivors and has maintained these really, deep friendships and collaborations with these individuals. So when the opportunity to do Secrets of Polygamy came up, of course, Tawny was in on the ground floor with that and drawing from her relationships that she's invested in over the years. So yes, between the two, you may see some familiar faces. It was also an opportunity for us to platform, other individuals who had stories that they hadn't told before, other people who, maybe weren't ready to talk then, but were ready to talk now. And yeah, I mean, I think those relationships are everything, which again sort of points to, we want to collaborate with people who not only have a story to tell, but it will benefit them to tell that story. Individuals like Rachel Jeffs, who is, not just a survivor, but also an activist and a writer, and somebody who really has a mission, as much as we can do to kind of provide her with a platform, to do that, it benefits us both ways.
Since the show came out, have you heard any stories, or do you know anything about if it's increased the number of women and people who are leaving these groups?
Yeah, I mean, I think from when we first started to tell this story to today, a lot has happened in these communities, in the FLDS specifically, which is what most people think of when they think of polygamists, the prairie dresses, the long braids. Warren Jeffs is in prison now. And there's much more scrutiny towards that group than there was 10 years ago, certainly 20 years ago. So a lot has changed. There's still a lot of abuses happening, but I think, listen, I think it's always important to shine a light on injustices. And, I don't think for these folks, the fight's ever going to be over. When we started to do Secrets of Polygamy, one of the people that Tawny first spoke with was actually a New York Times, or maybe it was a Washington Post journalist. He was a really, really smart guy who had been covering this world for many, many years. And when Tawny asked him, why is it so important for you to tell these stories? He said for him, it was about the idea of theocracy, right? These individuals have created these kind of microcosms where, it is essentially a theocracy. And these people were controlling women, children, and men under the guise of religion. And he felt like there were greater implications for all of us. That, there are things that were happening in these communities that we need to watch out for, even on a sort of a macro level. So I think, there's a lot of reasons to keep shining the light. And while it may seem like sort of a passive thing to do, just telling stories, we're not out there changing legislation or putting people in jail or arresting people. We're not law enforcement. But I do think it has those greater implications later. And certainly for some of these individuals that we feature on Escaping Polygamy, those women did go on to speak before the legislature and actually enact bills and laws that made it tougher to get away with stuff. So, providing them with a platform to do that, I think, is a small piece of what they went on to do.
Media is incredibly powerful. I mean, you try to get someone to tune into C-SPAN to pay attention to something, or tune into something on Lifetime or True Crime. I mean, look at, frankly, what even a scripted show has done for the Menendez brothers. Like, I mean, it is absolutely completely powerful when everyone engages in a story and feels connected. And when Warren Jeffs is in jail, and there's more work to do, certainly. But, I mean, you mentioned like getting your car door bashed in. I mean, was there any other sort of moments when you were confronted by anyone? Was it awkward ever?
With Secrets of Polygamy, I think the Order or the Kingston group did come out with a statement, obviously with their position, denying any wrongdoing, also saying that the show wasn't very good, which I thought was hilarious.
You're a critic now. Okay.
So I was also kind of like critical from a creative perspective, which was the piece that surprised me. So yeah, I mean, they're allowed to say their piece. We're allowed to say our piece. But for the most part, it's been okay. I think that's the thing of just standing in a ray of light. That alone kind of protects you, right? You sort of put it out there for everyone to see. It's what happens in the shadows that you have to worry about. But I think, and that's what we try to, that's what we try to do. I think sometimes people feel actually more comfortable sharing if they've got sort of a spotlight on them, just to air it all out. So yeah, I mean, there have been incidents, but I think for the most part, we've been rewarded for sort of being bold and just putting it out there. So it's been, on the whole, I would say it's more positive than negative.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know it can be. There's been a few things I've pursued that have felt, one that you and I talked about way early on, about a particular community that I grew up around. I was honestly, I'm going to be honest with you, too scared to do it. But I think it's so crucial and so important. So just the bravery to kind of get in there. And I also think, I don't know the timing of when you reached out versus when you guys started filming, but it takes a long time.
Yeah.
To make the connections, to create the relationships, to understand the environment and the people, and not just, like I said, show up and sort of disrupt everyone's daily lives. And so
yeah,
having that patience and wherewithal to stick with it for an extended amount of time, I think is so important.
It is hard because, they have to stick with it too for, there are folks that we talked about, and it wasn't until like a year later that we actually ended up getting them on camera. And you sort of have to preface it with, maybe this will go nowhere. You're sort of taking this chance, talking to me, telling your story, and I'm going to try as hard as I can to create an opportunity for your story to be told far and wide, but I may not be successful. And that's part of it too, being honest with people and saying, you're taking a chance, I'm taking a chance, let's try this. It may go nowhere or it may go everywhere. Are you prepared for either scenario? And just being totally honest with people from the get-go. I think that's super important, especially in an industry like ours where it's so unpredictable.
100%. I took a couple of notes from you using that type of language, because early on I was developing and I was talking to people, and this, the immediate question is like, well, when is it coming out? And what's going to happen and who's going to see it? And there's a lot of interest around how much exposure they're going to get, or wanting to predict sort of certain things immediately. And I, as a producer, just got really comfortable, again, taking a note from your book of just saying, I don't know, but we're going to swing for the fences. Like, we're going to do the thing. We're going to tell the story and we're going to see what happens. And as long as we are like authentic and honest, like, we know we've done our part, and the other stuff we'll see. And I just became really comfortable, because I was like casting really, really good friends and certain things. And I was like, how do I communicate with them that it may or may not, go somewhere? Or when I'm speaking to a subject and they're nervous, how do I talk to them about these things where I don't even know? I don't know where it will go or what will happen. You just get comfortable with being able to say, I don't know, but we're going to do it honestly. And that's what I can promise you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I don't have all the answers. I think the most important thing is to convey your sense of passion. I don't know where this is going to go, but I love it. I'm in it. I'm committed to it. And I will take it as far as I possibly can. So between that and I think just being transparent with folks about what you're doing, that's how you start to build these long-lasting relationships.
Yeah, 100%. So I want to take it back. So how did you even get into, I'm going to spend just a couple minutes on how you got into the industry, because you've been in it for quite a while. I mean, even at RIVR, you've been there, 11, 12 years?
Yeah.
And you had a career before that. So did you always want to do this? What were the early days like for you?
No, I went to UCLA Film School. And, like all film students, your focus at that time is scripted and particularly features. UCLA Film School is a little different than, like, say, USC, where UCLA Film School really feels like an art school, right? Like, it is small, It is intimate. It is really focused on the art of cinema and the history of cinema and film theory. I would say, at least back when I was there, it was a class of less than 30 people, and this is undergraduate. So everyone was made to feel very special. It was definitely the artist's way, right? So that's kind of, in that sense, it helped me find my voice creatively. It allowed me to kind of talk about my ideas, my opinions. It really honed that aspect of me, but it did not necessarily prepare me for a career in this industry and, just being a person who gets paid. So right out of film school, I interned at a number of different production companies, again, mostly in the feature world, and then ended up just needing a job. Ended up working at a production company that did do unscripted. And that was, coincidentally at the time when unscripted was really starting to boom. And it was a place where there were a lot of jobs available. And I think the other thing there were two things I liked about unscripted, but then also just television in general. One was that the pace was much, much faster than in the feature world. So even as an intern, working at scripted production companies, there would be scripts that would come across your desk, and these things had been in development hell for like over a decade.
Yeah.
Not a lot gets made, and things sort of hang around and collect dust for years and years and years. I'm sort of an instant gratification kind of person, so that did not appeal to me at all. Maybe it's just a lack of, patience, but I liked that at that time, television moved faster. It's still kind of maybe slow compared to other industries, but
I came
moves
from
faster.
the digital world. And I remember the person I was talking to about transitioning into this, she was like, it's so slow because we worked in digital. But you're right, compared to scripted, it's like
compared to scripted. I mean, everything's slower now. That's just the state of things. But back then it felt a lot faster than sort of laboring over one precious script and trying to sell it for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
That seemed like there's a reason why it's called development hell. It seems like hell. So I love that it was more fast paced. And I also say that, in terms of television in general at that time, I saw more female executives, more women on top. There were, women at sort of the highest ranks than I saw in the sort of film world, which still very much felt like a boys' club at every level. And it seemed to me that in unscripted especially, but then also just television in general, there were more females out there to look up to. There were women who were already doing it, who had built really wonderful careers. And it also just felt kind of like a more diverse part of the industry in general. So for those reasons, it became immediately appealing. It wasn't what I had set out to do, but there was just an opportunity there. So, I ended up working as an assistant to an SVP of development and just kind of worked my way up the ranks. And, now doing this, but I have to say it's been really good. And, speaking of finding your niche, I mean, I feel like that's what I did. I managed to kind of find a career where I get to tell stories and meet interesting people and still have a life and, raise a family. And it's great. I have no regrets in terms of that. It's been a really nice, wild ride. Hopefully it keeps going.
I love it. I mean, going to film school, listening, again, like you said, it's storytelling. Every pitch deck we make, whether it's a competition game show or a Fixer to Fabulous, which you also work on, or Secrets of Polygamy, it's story, it's art. It's all of those critical storytelling elements and character building and finding compelling people. That's all, things from film school, the narrative world that you bring into unscripted to really hone in on your own intuition and gut feeling, because so much of this world is that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, listen, even thinking back to film school, I feel like I was always attracted to real stories. That was always more appealing to me than making my own up. I think if you're curious about the world and you're curious about people and people's journeys and you want to walk in a bunch of different people's shoes, unscripted or documentary, that's an incredible way to go. If that's kind of where your curiosity leads you.
You're right. It's a different adventure every day.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's what I love so much about it too, is you can work on true crime, home, lifestyle, culinary, all at one time. It is so dynamic and diverse. And another thing you said that I love was every person I meet with, I would say 90% of the people that I meet with in this industry are women. And I love that for us. And there's much more of just a collaborative feeling about it that I really, really like.
Yeah, and it's a nice community. I mean, I think, I'm not sure what, people think of from the outside looking in, what
Right.
people
Yeah.
assume,
I think they think we're
reality
evil.
TV
I'm not gonna
producers
lie.
are.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I mean, Adam and I talk about this all the time, like for the most part, the folks that we do business with and we've met and we've befriended over the years are really amazing, wonderful people. There's a lot of amazing people in our industry, good people. And I think that's another reason why, after all these years, I'm still in it.
I think the outside perception is that, like, and while we were scrappy, I just think there's this idea that it's like seedy and like everyone's smoking cigarettes. I don't know why, but I
It's
think
like a swimming with sharks situation,
totally, yeah,
and
yeah,
maybe other
exactly. That
parts
we're
of
like
the entertainment world
praying.
are. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
But
so
not this. Yeah,
interesting.
it's a very nice community.
Absolutely. Is there anything you're watching right now or that you've watched in the past few months that you like really love?
Gosh, in the unscripted space, let me think what I'm watching these days. It's interesting. We're doing some stuff with the NBA, and I watched a documentary about Giannis, the Greek freak, from the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm have to say, I cried. I just thought it was so well done. And I'm not like a big sports person either. And I was immediately captivated by his story. I thought the filmmaker, the producers did such a great job of taking, one man's sort of heroic journey, this sort of athletic journey, but then also connecting the dots to greater things happening in our world. He was somebody who grew up in Greece, but they were African immigrants. And I thought they did such a good job of capturing the immigrant experience in Greece. It was so beautifully done. Again, it was one person's story, but there was social context. There was historical context. There was, there's also the sports aspect. It was so deeply layered. It was just a reminder of how, inside every individual story, it's like we contain multitudes, right? Like there's the universe inside of all of us. I thought it did a really good job of that. So that was the last thing I saw in the sort of documentary unscripted space where it's like I got emotional and I was inspired.
It looks like it's the Marvelous Journey on Prime,
Yes,
if anyone wants to
that's
watch
exactly.
it. So, okay, I will bookmark that. And then what is your like all-time reality show?
The other sort of big reality journey I've been on, and I didn't start watching this show back in the day, I only started watching it this year, was Vanderpump Rules. I
Yes.
started episode 1, season 1. It's a journey I started with one of my really, really close friends, who's a journalist, and not, again, she had just started watching it. I decided to start watching it too. Obviously, Scandal had already happened. So I was aware of that, but, she was like, you have to start watching it from the very beginning, and the world building and all the layers that goes on into these people. And we were right away hooked. And it is now this, on the top of just being like a really just amazingly well done show, with characters that I find just so addictive, and actually so likable. It's also been just this incredible journey I've taken with my friend. Yeah, we have this like language now of like Vanderpump Rules, and it's really sort of added this wonderful dimension to our friendship. And we've been friends for 20 years.
Right.
So I'm so glad that I'm on this journey with her.
It's so true. I watched Vanderpump pre-Scandival, but I was still late to the game, really. And I remember season 1, the arc that I'm not going to spoil that lie, right? That got carried all the way to the end, and that like Shakespearean ending. I was like, this is the greatest television I've ever seen.
It's a masterpiece.
The fact that it is, and that's proven in how many seasons it's gone. I mean, it's just it's absolutely insane. And there is something about these shows, about unscripted shows versus scripted. And of course, like, yes, we have friends and we'll bond over scripted shows, but there is something about Vanderpump, Housewives, Bravo, like these real shows, especially with your girlfriends, that you bond over.
I know.
It is
true.
So much fun. And I think that's what entertainment's all about, is we've like, I think we got so isolated when we were watching it for such a long time. We used to all tune in on Monday night for Idol or like whatever. And now I feel like that like collective viewing experience is back.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. Like, I think it's so much fun. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. Vanderpump is like top for me as well.
I absolutely love it.
It's gold.
I love those rascals. And they do feel like, they themselves start to feel like friends.
I know.
Really, really. And it's interesting that you say sort of that collective watching experience. My husband and I talk about this all the time. It's like, we want to check something out because we want to be a part of the conversation. And I know that we're sort of at a point in pop culture where it's no longer monoculture. I remember, as a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, you all sort of watched the same thing. You didn't have like a million choices like you do now. And there was this very pronounced monoculture. Now everything's so broken up, but there is still that conversation, that sort of mainstream pop culture conversation that happens around things that are really big hits or really big sort of cultural game changers. And we love being a part of the conversation.
We do.
We will check something out just because we don't want that conversation to pass us up. We want to be a part of it. So, I mean, I think that's the part of pop culture that is so fun. We all get to talk about something together.
And I think unscripted, like television shapes so much of it. I can think of Scandival, Tiger King, Housewives. Like there's been a million moments from even the past couple of years that are all coming from what we do in our industry that has everyone in the world talking. So it's a cool place to be for sure. Well, thank you so much for talking to me and chatting. It was good to just catch up with you in general for sharing like all of your amazing insights of being a professional and certainly handling the sensitivity of diving into these different worlds. So thank you so much for sharing. It was awesome to have you.
Thank you. I'm glad to talk to you and thank you for having me.
Thank you guys for listening to this really special episode. I think storytelling and documentary storytelling specifically is so important now more than ever. I love the entertaining stuff. I love the dating formats. But truth-telling and diving in and getting uncomfortable is what we really need more of. I hope your day is full of lots of love. And I'm really excited for next week's episode. See you in a week on the Unscripted Files. If you or someone you know is a victim of domestic violence, you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 800-799-SAFE, SAFE, 800-799-7233 if you ever need support. The Unscripted Files is brought to you by Good Gravity Entertainment. Thank you to producer Bonnie Adams, original music by composer William Wright, artwork by Lisa Schweikert, and photography by Reed Schick.